Indonesia has attempted to invade Malaysia in the past, but how and why? The Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation, or Borneo confrontation, simply known as konfrontasi in Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore, was an armed conflict from 1963 to 1966 that stemmed from Indonesia's opposition to the creation of the state of Malaysia. The creation of Malaysia was a merger of the Federation of Malaya, now Peninsular Malaysia, Singapore, and the British Crown colonies of North Borneo and Sarawak, collectively known as British Borneo, now East Malaysia, in September 1963. Vital precursors to the conflict included Indonesia's policy of confrontation against Dutch New Guinea from March to August 1962, and the Indonesia-backed Brunei Revolt in December 1962. Malaysia had direct military support from the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Indonesia had direct support from the USSR and China, thus making it an episode of the Cold War in Asia. The conflict was an undeclared war, with most of the action occurring in the border between Indonesia and East Malaysia, on the island of Borneo. Combat was usually conducted by company or platoon-sized operations on either side of the border. Indonesia's campaign of infiltrations into Borneo sought to exploit the ethnic and religious diversity in Sabah and Sarawak compared to that of Malaya and Singapore, with the intent of unraveling the proposed state of Malaysia. During confrontasi from 1963 to 1966, there was fighting between the Indonesian, Malaysian, and Commonwealth forces along the long land border that Malaysia shared with Indonesia in East Malaysia. Many soldiers spent months patrolling the border, including Singaporean and Australian soldiers in Sarawak. The jungle terrain of Borneo and the lack of roads straddling the Malaysia-Indonesia border forced both Indonesian and Commonwealth forces to conduct long-foot patrols. Both sides relied on light infantry operations and air support. Rivers were also used as a method of transport and infiltration. Although combat operations were primarily conducted by ground forces, airborne forces played a vital support role, and naval forces ensured the security of the sea flanks. The British provided most of the defensive effort, although Malaysian forces steadily increased their contributions. There were periodic contributions from Australian and New Zealand forces within the combined Far East Strategic Reserve, stationed then in West Malaysia and Singapore. Initially, Indonesian attacks on East Malaysia relied heavily on local volunteers trained by the Indonesian army. Over time, infiltration forces became more organized, with the inclusion of a more substantial component of Indonesian forces. To deter and disrupt Indonesia's growing campaign of infiltrations, the British responded in 1964 by launching their own covert operations into Indonesian Kalimantan under the codename Operation Claret, coinciding with Sukarno announcing a year of dangerous living and the 1964 race riots in Singapore. Indonesia launched an expanded campaign of operations into West Malaysia on August 17, 1964, albeit without military success. A buildup of Indonesian forces on the Kalimantan border in December 1964 saw the UK commit significant forces from the UK-based Army Strategic Command. The intensity of the conflict began to subside following the coup of October 1964 and Sukarno's loss of power to General Suharto. A round of serious peace negotiations between the two sides began in May 1966, and a final peace agreement was signed on August 11, 1966, with Indonesia formally recognizing Malaysia.